Hello everyone, I am John from OnTableTop and I am joined by Chris from Battlefront. And if you haven't already guessed, we're going to be talking about World War III Team Yankee, which is definitely up there in my top 10 tabletop games for several reasons. For its range of miniatures, which are fantastic, its setting, which is different to a lot of other tabletop games, particularly when you're playing with semi-historical, semi-fictional. You're looking at a fictional thing, but based on real life, which is an interesting mix that you don't see very often.
Yeah, it's a niche
cool
on its own, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, oh, okay, oh, that's a good idea. We like that one, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And in this video, we're going to be doing a bit of a welcome to the setting. So if you haven't played what it was previously called Team Yankee, only Team Yankee, just in case you haven't come across it before or you're unfamiliar with it, we wanted to do a little brief. Here's what it is, here's the setting, here's what's happening. And I'm going to start straight off by saying, if you want to understand a bit more of the fictional side of it, this is based on a novel.
Yes, that's right.
A lot of this, what happens in the first few pages of the rulebook, is based entirely on a novel called Team Yankee, which is a fantastic read. I have it on Audible and it's great.
Yeah.
So, where should we start? So, let's set the stage for what the world is doing at the stage when this book is set.
Yeah, absolutely. So World War III Team Yankee is set within the Cold War.
Yeah.
The Cold War being East versus West, quite literally. So that period sort of between the end of the Second World War and really the early 90s, but possibly still today a little bit, you could argue. I mean, there's definitely modern connotations. And it's following the end of the Second World War. Europe is quite literally divided down the middle through Germany. And on one side, you've got America, Britain, a lot of Western European nations, all under the NATO. In the sort of the Eastern Bloc, you've got the Soviets, as Russia was at that point, as well as their Warsaw Pact friends and neighbours. You've got the Czechs, the Poles. You've also got East Germany, which is a very big distinction, with Germany literally being split at the end of the Second World War. And the premise of what Team Yankee is that the Soviets have invaded the West. The West are then trying to contain that and then coming up with a moral dilemma of, do we just push them back to the starting positions? Or do we go full hog and obviously invade the East, basically? But then do we become as bad as the bad guys, or then the bad guys who are actually the good guys in their minds are thinking, no, we're trying to get them out of Europe.
Yeah.
But it's a global thing. So you've got Middle East. There's a lot happening in the Middle East, which may or may not follow what actually happened in reality. There's a few changes of size which you wouldn't sort of imagine. And as we were talking about, it broadly follows what could have happened, but then veers off to an actual alternate reality.
Yeah. And what's really fascinating about it is when I went through the novel for Team Yankee, I was getting the sense of the Americans felt like they were in control a lot of the time, even though when they weren't.
Yes.
But when you hear about, occasionally the main character is in a briefing and they're talking about what North Ag, we'll explain all North Ag Centag, all that, we'll explain that. They're talking about how the British are doing in the north, and it doesn't sound very good for them because the terrain is far more adaptive to what the Soviet army was trained to be, how it was trained to fight. And you get this idea of chaos happening all over the place. And when you realize, when I looked into the novel, into the background of Team Yankee and everything, that a lot of what was written about this in the novel, as well as other things, was based on a lot of war games that had been played out by NATO countries back in the day, which brings that real sense of realism to it, where when you're playing the game on the tabletop, you're going, actually, I'm playing a game here that's based on a lot of research that's been done by military forces during the period that it's set in.
Yeah.
And that brings it from not being an entirely fictional game, but bringing it into that what-if scenario, but a very grounded what-if scenario.
Absolutely. It's the kind of what-if scenario whereby it could happen. I mean, I saw a great photo to one of our Facebook groups where a Canadian commander is sat in front of a 3-bank computer screen, and he's obviously inputting data about how his forces are doing in this war game exercise, and on the desk next to him is a copy of the Team Yankee rulebook. And it's like, wow, okay, so we've actually got something here that is truly ready to go. And even Harold Coyle, who wrote Team Yankee, he was an officer in the US Army, sort of around mid-1985, and he was writing the original book. almost as this is what's happening day to day to me. He was obviously involved in war games because being an officer, he would be slightly higher up the command chain. So I guess that he really probably knew a lot more about it than what the average person on the street would. And we've taken that book, and as we'll show when we have a quick flick through this rule book in a moment, the opening scenarios and pages, as you've said, are literally Team Yankee, the book, the novel. And then we've taken that idea, that concept, and spread with it, and it's just then become that what if,
So looking at the timeline then, we're not sure how this war breaks out. We just know that all of a sudden everything went from quiet to Soviet tanks crossing the border.
Yeah, absolutely. So the West was kind of caught by surprise. I mean, at the front of the book, there is this great little section that I really like, which has kind of got a drawn-on map of Europe, and then you've got these articles here kind of from the newspapers. And the earliest article is actually this one down here, which is just basically saying there's a bit of a build-up of sort of, it's within the Middle East and the Persian Gulf, there's a build-up of hostilities there. They're sinking a few ships. And then it very quickly kind of goes on with the things and is left with, in view of the current crisis, the president has federalized 100,000 troops in America. And then, like you say, it goes from 0 to 60.
Yeah.
Quite literally. Oh, they're crossing the border. Okay, everything we've practiced for in the previous 40 years, sort of since, Checkpoint Charlie and the sort of tanks facing each other.
The instigation of the Reforger program.
Yeah,
as well.
Everything, every tension point, every crisis point in the previous 40 years suddenly becomes real.
Yeah.
And we've got, the Soviets attacking essentially what were traditionally Western cities and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's not a specific event. It's an amalgamation, and it's that confusion.
It also feels like, from the novel perspective, it feels like that level of command, that platoon level command, isn't going to be told how the war started. All they're going to know is the war has started.
Yes.
And there's a great line in the novel, I think, sums it up, where the main character in it,
Sean
Bannon, is basically thinking to himself, the West, the United States military, my commanders, and me have failed to prevent this war by being here.
Yes.
And it's like, that's all he knows. That's all he can understand, is that everybody above him, right down to him, have failed in their main mission, which was to prevent a Soviet attack. Yeah. And that's fine. He has to go into war with only that knowledge.
Yeah, of course.
And then being told what his missions are.
And it's almost sort of on the fly each time he goes to an ops brief and the mission's changed. Right, okay, thanks for doing that job over there. Now we need you over here. And it's, there's a lot running around. He gets tanks literally shot out from underneath him. And it's, if you've never read the book, I would definitely recommend it. I'm sure you've said before, it's a fantastic book.
There's 2 books to read.
Yes.
For background of this, for a broader sense of the chaos. So you have Team Yankee, which is your main one.
Yep.
But you also have one written from the British perspective called Chieftains.
Okay, yeah, I've not heard of that one actually.
However, Chieftains is a very hard book to get your hands on.
Right, okay.
It worked a little bit like the Team Yankee book. A lot of platoon commanders and commanders in the US military read Team Yankee during its release time and while the Cold War was still a very real thing. But Chieftains paints a very grim picture. It is not a novel you go into thinking, I'm going to watch a great NATO victory here. It does not end well. But those are the 2 books that I read when Team Yankee initially was being released with you guys. I was like, right, let's get into the mindset of it. Let's feel out the scenario and how it's all working. So obviously we're on to version 2 of the rulebook.
We are, yes.
Which has come with a name change, but also a little bit of a timeline change.
That's right, yeah. So this is something that you and I have been talking about, because we're very interested in our tanks anyway. Yeah. So the original Team Yankee was 1985, sort of tilting into 1986. You can tell that with what tanks you had, what formations were available and things like that.
Yeah.
With the move to what has basically become version 2 Team Yankee, and we've kind of got this name change now of World War III Team Yankee, it does 2 things. It obviously lets people know what the game's about.
Yeah.
But it allows us to move the timeline on to sort of 1986, 1987, late 80s, so that we can get cool plastic kits out again. We can get more tanks. We can get Tanks that people might more know of as well.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about it in another video, but the British are going to be having Challengers. Most people have heard of a Challenger if they haven't heard of the Chieftain.
Yep.
But it allows us, with that timeline shift as well, to move slightly away from the novel, because that was very much, this is what's happened, end of hostilities at the end of that.
Yeah.
But now to, actually the war's continued, you know, we're now facing this moral dilemma. Do we invade the East as allied NATO powers? Do we take the war into the Middle East a couple of years earlier than your real life Gulf War?
Yep.
Yep. Or do we maybe move over to Asia or do something over there? Or crazy talk, let's go down to Antarctica because, you know, it's a solid landmass. It could happen. So, but, you know, I'm not, you know, there's no spoilers there or anything, but it's that idea that actually this war has become global again.
Yep.
It is World War III. You know, we've had two previous in the same century.
Yeah.
And yeah, the idea is the timeline has just shifted that little bit on, that we can just introduce some really nice, cool kit.
Yep.
And that allows people to play what they like, what they know. And
it's like taking the concepts that Harold Coyle put down and saying, right, it doesn't end when you end it.
Yeah.
There was no cessation of hostilities. Things have gone on.
Yeah, they've carried on brewing up, you know.
Yeah, because we know from history and reality, we know that there was certain things brewing anyway, like the Middle East. You had the Gulf.
Yeah.
You had all that sort of stuff starting to bubble up in the mid to late 80s, and obviously turned into what we know as the Gulf War.
Of course.
And we will discuss this. We will discuss this more because
Yes.
you and I had some really interesting theories chatting back and forth about it.
Yeah.
So that's our timeline set.
Yes.
We know where we are. We know what's happening. There's a war going on. We know the two major players. We know that it's NATO versus the Warsaw Pact.
Yes.
But there's a lot of branching out that can be done now. It started to happen towards the end of the run of the first rule book.
Absolutely, yeah.
With other supplement books coming out.
Yeah.
You know, you had your East Germans, you had this, that, and the other. An oil war, which I loved. I hyped that so much because it brought everything I wanted to the table at that point.
Yeah.
But we're able to branch out. So what sort of forces are we looking at then? Like nation-specific stuff. Let's talk a wee bit about nation-specific stuff.
Of course. So the next major release that we are bringing out for World War III Team Yankee is the British.
Yep.
They'll be having a further book to Iron Maiden. So they had their original book, Iron Maiden. This is now World War III British book.
Yep.
Introduces some new formations, some new kit, some exciting new possibilities for new and existing players. Then we'll be moving on to the Americans. Obviously, another major player within NATO. They bring a lot of money, troops, tanks, etc. Within sort of the setting of Europe, they have a whole sector to themselves, whereas everyone else sort of shares it with maybe one or two others. With just how that they in real life actually split West Germany up to defend it. As you said, you know, we didn't do our job defending it from the Soviets. So you've got the Americans. Then in release order, we'll probably be looking at the Soviets, because obviously they are the other major player on the other side that essentially funded everybody else. We've also got West Germans. So the West Germans themselves are defending their own homeland. And the Bundeswehr were a major player within NATO, and they were obviously looking at doing their absolute best to defend their home.
Not only because they were part of NATO, but because it was going to be their land that was going to be invaded first.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any scenario that you look at, you know, even if they flew in, the Soviets, if they drove their tanks in, or if they simply walked as soldiers, would always have to go to the major cities of, you know, Hanover, Bonn, eventually maybe Essen could have been taken out. And the maps on this book, actually, I mean, we were discussing
open it up.
Yeah, we were discussing it earlier, and the opening map is... it's just here, and it's actually split between those sections. So in the north, you've got the Dutch Corps, you've got the German, the British, you've got some Belgians as well there. So you've got obviously your Low Countries, as well as all the way down to the Americans and the Germans reinforcing at the bottom as well. But then on the Soviet side, not only you've got the Soviets, and they are, like I say, the largest portion of the forces there, but you've got the East Germans. You've also got the Czech, as they were at the time, the Czechoslovakians. Obviously the Czech Republic now, and obviously it's split up since the end of the Cold War as we actually know it in real life, but at the time they were Czechoslovakia. Then you've also got the Polish troops as well. And that's not to say there's not going to be others. So we'll have essentially minor nations. So there could be the sort of down the bottom, shall we say, the Baltic states. You've got the likes of Hungary and things like that, Romania, that were all part of this Warsaw Pact, this coalition of defence that the Soviets put together very similar to NATO,
Yeah.
where it's essentially mutually assured destruction. You attack any one of us, we attack you, then you attack backwards and forwards, and it's that thing. So there's loads of nations that we're bringing out for it. And then, as you said, at the end of essentially, I think it was about June last year in 2019, we had Oil War come out, and Oil War was World War III in the Middle East, and it flipped a few things on its head.
It did.
So I must admit, I opened the book up, and like anybody, I'm new to a book. I open it up and have a look, and I'm like, the Iraqis? Hang on a minute. The Iraqis are NATO, and it flipped the scenario of Iraq attacking Kuwait as they did within the first Gulf War in the sort of 1990, 1991. And actually, the Iraqis were then allied with NATO versus Iran.
Yep.
You had the Syrians who were kind of on both sides, but used Iraqi sort of numbers, so they were helping the NATO more. And then it obviously introduced Israeli forces as well. Yeah. And the Israelis had some really nice kits. We had the Merkava tanks in there. But again, with the whole of the Middle East, they were buying kit from the NATO and the Warsaw Pact. So those armies were absolutely brilliant. You could have Warsaw Pact tanks with NATO tanks. And then you had helicopters from both sides and everything else. It was brilliant. I mean, I loved my Iranian army on that one. I absolutely loved it. You showed me your Iraqi army.
I painted up 2 forces for Oil War. One was meant to be a sort of Soviet in Afghanistan kind of style-esque to it. Yeah. It was just plain desert-y color. But the Iraqis were my little my little passion project for that. I think our vlogs are still up. If you're interested, I'll try and see if I can get the editor to put the links in below for that.
Absolutely.
Because that was a lot of fun to paint. So yeah, Oil War certainly did flip things on its head. Are we going to see more of that coming?
So yeah, within each book at the moment that we put together and we are releasing, there is a small section at the back of each one. We'll look at this in a lot more detail, but it shows the forces within a specific theatre of operation. So the British, this is what the British forces in the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, were actually like. Yep. And gives you suddenly crazy opportunities for doing other things. Like you just touched on it then with the Soviets in Afghanistan. That was never officially a part of it. It's nothing to say that they weren't there or they weren't helping. We were talking last night, you're going to be doing your British in desert colours. I've already got ideas for a US Marine Force for when the American book comes out. Again, all in desert colours. But we were talking about how quickly could this kit get to the theatre? Is it still going to be green? Is it still going to be in Murdoch or sort of NATO tricolour? It could be anything. You hear these stories in real life of the Gulf War where they're spraying it on the ship. Just so as it rolls down, the paint's still wet. Quite literally.
It was funny that because there was a painting video I did where I was actually a painting live stream I did on Team Yankee where I was asked to paint a chieftain, and I was like, well, what would I do? Oh, let's do the Battis colours, that green and sand camouflage. But I left the bazooka plates green. I thought, right, they've brought the Battis tanks over because they need the extra vehicles. Yeah. Well, obviously this one didn't come with bazooka plates, so they bolted on new ones.
Whatever they had,
and just sending stuff out as they can, because in times of war things get desperate.
Of course, I mean this is what we're saying with the Warsaw Pact attacking so quickly. Units wouldn't have been parade ground ready. They might not have even been in the right place at the right time. I mean, you can imagine leave getting cancelled within 2 hours' notice. Yeah. Whether that's a phone call or the MP hammering on the door saying you need to help. Yeah, you need to come and help us. So yeah, just bolting equipment on is not outside the realms of possibility. Even a mix of match of vehicles, and we'll talk about this on the specific books, but videos. But there is so much customization options now as well. Yeah, it's not streamlined. You don't have to take this. You can actually do whatever you kind of want for it. Yeah. Because war's never streamlined, is it? Stuff happens in war. You get mix and match of units. People get lost and everything else. So. Yeah, and it's just how exciting this project has become now from Team Yankee as it was, and it's got a massive player base that we're now looking to essentially recruit new hobbyists into it. Hence the easy sort of name change so people know exactly what it is, but down to the artwork of, freedom. And in they come, and you get new players getting excited about kit that they know about and everything else.
So the main takeaways I would say from this video is if you're new to the World War III Team Yankee world, basically, the universe as it changes. Yeah. What would be maybe your top 3 reasons to try it?
I would definitely say the models themselves. So, you've got these main battle tanks, and being in 15mm scale, you can get a lot of them. So there's a lot to show, and it's cool when stuff dies, isn't it? And that's the second point, I suppose. With it being Team Yankee, everything has its specific role. So things die very, very quickly. but it means that they kill things pretty quickly as well. So there's a lot of satisfaction as a wargamer on a 6x4 table. Watching stuff die every turn is fantastic. And possibly the third thing is for a lot of people, they've never considered playing, I would say, a semi-historical war game that's actually semi-modern. As we said, it's a crossover niche.
Yeah.
So for a lot of new players, it's something completely different they've never tried before. And I would always urge anybody that plays already, show as many people as you can so that they can kind of get excited. And then before you know it, you've got everybody playing what is essentially a really fast-paced, interesting and slightly different game at the same time. It's a really nice mix of the game, definitely.
Well, my top three is essentially I get to play with stuff that's a little different from World War II.
Yes.
Again, I would agree with you on the fast-paced stuff because a game, for example, with Flames of War, there's a lot more decision-making involved.
Yes.
I need to make sure that this platoon is doing this job right now. It needs to do that, but I also need to equip it in case something else happens.
It's that what-if side of it.
Yeah. And the other thing is, from a modeler's, painter's perspective, I get to paint stuff that I don't usually paint. I get to put down my olive drab. I get to put down my my Russian green. I get to put down the German camouflage beige, which are the three staples of any World War II gamer. And I get to pick up stuff like the Chieftain green and the Yankee green and do some strange things. I even get dared to paint Berlin Brigade.
Yes.
I'm going to have to research and try out at some point.
Yeah, that was part of the conversation last night where I actually said to John to paint the Berlin Brigade camo on his Challengers and or any other tank that he's got in his British force. So, and it's that beauty of it, isn't it? You put in your head as a modeler around that question, right? How can I effectively paint this? And also, crazily, on a 15mm model because it's not big. No. It's not, you're not talking.
Anyway, that is our takeaways from it, and that is our welcome to World War III, basically.
Yes.
If you have any comments or anything like that, please do leave them below. And we hope you enjoyed it as we go on and continue to explore more about the rule book. We're going to be looking closer at the British book, and we're going to be looking at some of the other stuff and having a bit of a chit-chat as well. There will be kits as well. We will be checking out some of the vehicles too, which will be nice. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you again in the next one.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.